Let me see.
Okay, saying we're live right now. I'm gonna mute you for 1 second. Let me just get on here and see. Grace and peace, everybody. I want to make sure I have everything lined up and give everyone a couple of seconds to come in here. Make sure I can see myself properly on this. I always look on my phone prior to because I know it's a couple of seconds behind prior to it coming up in the comment section as y'all are coming in. Grace and peace is green. Yeah, just type 1. Exodus, good to see you. Good to see you. Good afternoon, Sister Fox. Good to see you. Hopefully, I'm sounding all right. Dunamis, I'm sounding all right. I should be sounding a little bit extra today. Um, I got a brother on. Y'all know that I am attempting to share truth, and there's a lot of people that's in the middle when we start having certain conversations, when we start having certain dialogues. There are some people that come on here. Y'all know my whole situation with the urban apologetic community, me attempting, with the Messianic thing, and just want to bring clarity. In the midst of that, there's some people that's confused about what I do. A lot of people say, "Well, you become a Israelite. Berena's become an Israelite," and the word has got out like that, Elder Johnson. And I would often correct people and tell people that I'm a tongue talking Pentecostal, that I'm Christian, but I don't push that. So because I don't push everybody in this room have to speak in tongues, people automatically, and they see that I would have specific Messianic Israelites on. I try to stay away from the campers, but I want the church to be educated on specifically Messianic believers because they are so close to what many would call the historic Christian faith, Black Gentiles that don't consider themselves Israelites. And in the midst of that, I want to make sure that we bring clarity and we bring information. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a Christian apologist. If I'm a Christian apologist, I have an agenda that I'm pushing, and I'm lifting up the Christian faith, and I'm closing in the back door, and I'm speaking for Christianity specifically. And if I'm an apologist, I'm going to speak in defense of something. So I'm not going to talk about the bad side of Christianity. And Christianity does have a bad side, but I have a freedom now that I'm not an apologist. I can give the good, the bad, and the ugly. But sometime I would have Christian pastors on, Israelite pastors on, and it's their job to promote whatever. If you're an Israelite and you're a pastor, it's your job to promote Israel. Period. The Bible and Israel is in the Bible. There's nothing wrong with that. So I want to bring some clarity out by saying that I like to bring both sides. Sometimes I've had try to bring people on at both sides at once, and it's turned into a baby zoo, some arguing, some back and forth. And sometimes I find it where it's better to talk with individuals separately. I'm going to bring a brother on. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Come on, brother. I'm going to unmute you, and then we're going to get into the whole thing because I was on not too long ago with some of my Israelite brothers and sisters, and church folk don't like when I say that, but I say it because I believe we all have differences. Christendom is we're so separated on so many things, and I'm going to deal with that 6 o'clock this evening when we start, or 6 or 7 o'clock this evening when we start talking about the New Age and the church and yoga and esoteric yoga, but that's a different thing. I'm going to bring a brother on. I said there were some things that were left up in the air about certain statements that were made from pastors in the community, certain apologists, and I think we have to revisit those things. I said they were left up in the air, and I see some people are going to try to make statements and just shut it down. There's nothing else to say. No, if I get out here and I make statements about Osiris, I got to show and prove if I'm going to continue with a channel. I have to back up what I said. I can't just get out here and say I don't have to prove it to anybody because that's fake news. And we see with this whole thing with the presidency election, there's a lot of fake news out here. Now, some people are promoting fake news because of ignorance, and some people are deliberately doing it to promote agenda or to promote their group. Any way you cut the slice the cake, it's wrong to do it. So we're just trying to get clarity when we're discussing certain things. Come on, brother, introduce yourself. I'm gonna mute you right now. I'm gonna mute my microphone. I think I can mute this thing here, and I'm gonna sip my coffee.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Abu Khamar. I'm a amateur student of Semitic languages, very much emphasis on amateur, with an interest in Israelite topics. My interests in and the Christian apologetic side of that, and mainly my focus has been on the linguistic side of things and mainly on One West. But recently, in the last year, people have encouraged me to look at some of the some Israelites that have linguistic subjects beyond One West. So that would be, for example, the claim about the Pews in Georgia. So too, the gentleman Basil Akwete Amah saying that the Erve language is actually Hebrew. And so I've delved into that. And so in the last year, I've been putting out videos attempting to start a discussion on the pews at First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, and whether or not there's any discernible language in those pews and what that language might be. That's an interest of mine.
And another thing that's a problem is because recently Vocab was on with Pastor Isaiah promoting his book, and they brought up the pews again. I was already saying this, but being that Vocab interviewed him, they brought up the pews again, and they believe it's basically it's anybody that say there's Hebrew writing on the pews, they're moving in deception. We had a pastor on, and he spoke on the pews. I remember he dropped a video 2 years ago speaking on the pews, and I was under the impression, especially after you're saying this is what they don't want you to know. It did leave me originally before other people came discussing it, and you're one and some other individuals came discussing it. I was under the impression that the slaves that built that church were Israelites. And they wrote, or they kind of left their insignia on the pews, and they wrote some words in the Hebrew language. Now, you don't know any words that you can see specifically now. People have started making statements. Is there any discernible Hebrew words from your understanding on the pews whatsoever?
No. So from what I've seen, I don't feel that there's any discernible language of any sort in the markings on those pews, and that's the impression I've come away with from looking at it. I've attempted to make a hypothetical case for Arabic, which we might show later, just to show what a person should do if they're going to demonstrate the presence of language in the pews. And so while it is my position that there is no discernible language in the pews, I am always interested and willing to see others present a case, because of course I'm fallible and I could miss something. So if there's discernible language in the pews, I would like for someone to show it and show how they arrive at their conclusion. I'd like to discuss their methodology with them. But yes, as you said, my position is that there is no discernible language. That's the sincere conclusion I've reached. There's no discernible language, whether Hebrew or anything else, in the pews.
And so far, I don't know anyone that got there and actually read the pews and said it means A, B, C, and D. And actually, I believe, if I'm correct, you could correct me if I'm wrong, the church actually changed their stance.
Yes.
I remember seeing, like I said, I remember seeing a few weeks back, Garfield hit me, and another brother Salter on Sinetta TV, shout out to him, and he hit me, and he brought out some interesting points saying the same thing. Leader for Christ, let me ask y'all up next. Let me ask y'all a question, because I woke up to some statements by I believe it was the brother Ron Dalton and so many other people. Do you think when we're dealing with certain subjects like DNA, certain subjects like languages, we should have people that are trained in that area? Because maybe some of our confusion with languages and DNA and different things is because I'm not a student of certain things, so I don't think I can really talk on DNA as somebody that's real. I don't think I have a good working knowledge to do that. And I think maybe some people can muddy the waters when they get out here, and they'll start promoting themselves as a professional in a specific field, and because they want to promote their agenda so bad. Not saying that they're doing it intentionally attempting to mislead a people, but that they want to really promote something so bad. I've heard pastors do it. They've preached and they've brought out and they said certain things. I'm like, no, they're a little off right there. But I believe they mean good in their heart. But you can have good intentions and still mislead a people. Come on, brother, come to the microphone. Tell me what you think.
What I would say is that ideally, we would want people who are informed on a subject to speak on a subject. But I would also say that that doesn't mean we have to exclude people who might not have in-depth training in a subject. The only thing I would ask is, irrespective of a person's level of training in a subject, that they nonetheless focus on the subject itself and show their methodology. That's my main thing, because even someone who's a novice or who's new to a subject could bring some new insights. And so what's important is not so much the person bringing the argument, but the argument itself. And that's always where my interest is. I'm not, I myself am not any sort of like expert in any subject. I myself am an amateur, so it's not my place to try to exclude anyone else. But I do feel that irrespective of a person's status, it's better to focus on the argument and not on the person.
And we often we see a lot of that with information coming out. People would say, well, I'm going to debunk this today, and they'll get out here and they'll talk, or they'll put a title up, and the conversation is actually about something else. So we'll see ad hominems coming from both sides.
Yes.
One thing about me, Barine, y'all can say what y'all want, and I fear I've lost speaking engagements. I did certain things to take a stance for a people, always claiming I'm not Israel, but take a stance for specific people because I didn't want them misrepresented, and I wanted a fair place where people can come and dialogue. Do you think, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. I see the comment you have up there from
second. Yes, second, yeah, please, second actually, he come through like, good to see you, brother. Go ahead. Read his comment and read this thing coming up.
He writes, the amateur student of Hebrew cannot discern it because he lacks the codex. So what I would say is that it is possible that there could be language that I, for example, am not able to recognize, and that's fine. What I would say is that if someone's going to say that, though, they should present their case for how they reach the conclusion that there's languages on the pews. It can't just be like, well, maybe it's something esoteric that nobody knows. For someone to make a positive claim for language in the pews, they should present their case. Is it possible that it's in a style that I don't recognize? Yeah, of course. That's possible, at least in theory. Absolutely.
Okay, somebody else said, who put it there? That's interesting too. Who put it there? They said the slaves that were there, the African church, that they said the original slaves that were there in the late 1700s, early 1800s are the ones that put it there. It was my impression that it was originally set up like it was Hebrew, and they were speaking the Hebrew language. Before we even get into this, when people argue, have you heard of this Lakadesh language? Talk a little bit about,
I mean, honestly,
about that first.
I would say, so Faithful to God and Vocab Malone, they have a number of videos on the subject of Lashon Kodash, and the videos they have, they're sharing videos narrated by me, because that is the Israelite topic that I've been most interested in Lashon Kodash. It's something separate from the question about the pews, I think. But yeah, Lashon Kodash is it's an approach to Hebrew pronunciation that, as far as I can see, began at One West sometime in the late 20th century, and since the Israelites have gone onto the internet, it has now spread beyond the One Westers. Now there are non-One West Israelites, including Pastor Kelly Richardson, who also use essentially Lashon Kodash. People who are not part of any One West camp.
Now I noticed some people that pronounce. Have you ever heard of it outside in regular Hebrew speaking, Semitic speaking circles? Have you ever heard of it in university professors, people that speak the language now? Have you ever heard of that, or you think that's primarily something that began? Where do you think it came from?
Yeah, Lashon Kodash, I'm absolutely certain it began with One West, perhaps with Abba Bivens, with Edward Meredith Bivens, the founder of the Tanakh School at One West. But yeah.
What about you in Exodus? I'm asking y'all the same question too. What was it spoken? Was it spoken coming out of the temple, coming out of in Second Temple period? Is it 500, 800, 900 years old? How old is that terminology and the way they pronounce words? I remember there was a video people were passing around and asking me about the shalom and why different groups pronounce certain things a different way. Are they attempting to clean up the language that European Jewry messed up or don't really understand it? Are they bringing a deeper truth to the Hebrew language that all of Europe might have missed?
My impression is that Lashon Kodash, and by that I don't mean the phrase itself, but I mean the system of pronunciation where every character has only one vocalization. It's my understanding that did not exist before the second half of the 20th century.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you read that on screen here?
The comment from Mark Harris?
Yes, please.
It says, someone who can read ancient Hebrew languages should know if the writing on the so-called pews is Hebrew language. Get an expert to decipher it. If I may comment, it's interesting. Pastor Kelly Richardson has posted before on Facebook. Vocab Malone read some of the posts on air a while back. He said that there have even been Hebrew scholars who looked at the pews and couldn't decipher any words in there. And that's something, a contention that both Vocab and I have made. I think, if I may say, there's been a misunderstanding between Vocab and Pastor Richardson, insofar that the focus that we put on no one being able to discern any Hebrew words, much less phrases, in the pews, and saying that neither Kelly Richardson nor anyone else can find Hebrew in those pews, or discernible Hebrew, was not an attempt to impugn Pastor Richardson's knowledge. It was not an attempt to depict him as ignorant. It was an attempt to say that if no one who's looked at it, including students of Hebrew, including, according to Pastor Kelly Richardson, scholars, if no one has seen any discernible Hebrew words in there, then perhaps the best conclusion is that there is no discernible language in there.
And there's and one of the problems, if we're dealing with truth, that's not an attack on blacks claiming that they're Israelites in America. The pew don't have the pew can be in Czech, it could be in Geese, it could be in any language. It doesn't have anything directly to do with blacks in America claiming to be Israelites. But if it's promoted in such a way, this is where the problem could be coming in. If it's promoted in such a way as to prove that the earlier slaves were Israelites, that can be problematic up next. That in itself can be problematic. But I don't think we should blend the two things together. This is just one argument that people are working with, that we're working with. If it's Hebrew and somebody can come out and claim that it's Hebrew, but if it's scholars can't, that read Hebrew, that read Aramaic, that read Arabic, and they're saying, no, we don't, we just see some, it looks like it could be, like you said, it could be some Arabic characters in here, or if it's plainly not Hebrew and it was set forth to like it was Hebrew for the ignorant like myself and those that don't know it all, and we were trusting that it was, and that is another piece in the toolbox, or that's another piece in the puzzle to prove that blacks in America are Israelites. But if it's not, we can put it to the side. That doesn't prove everything. That doesn't throw away everything, but that cannot be promoted in that sense. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is that I've been on this subject for about a year now, and I've always preferred that questions of lineage be separated from questions of language, especially when discussing them with Israelites, because they become so contentious and so imbued with emotion that it winds up locking up the discussion. So, for example, even fairly recently, when you had both Pastor Kelly Richardson and Vocab Malone on, Vocab offered to discuss the pews with Kelly Richardson, and Kelly Richardson interpreted it as an attack on his identity claim. And Vocab held up that paper sign that said it's about language, not lineage. What Vocab was trying to convey, and I agree with him here, is that we should separate the question of language and lineage. And the way I would put it is this: I don't claim to speak on anyone's lineage across millennia, but if, hypothetically speaking, I concluded that Pastor Kelly Richardson was an Israelite, or that people who built that church were Israelites, that still would not convince me that there is Hebrew on those pews. Those are two very different subjects, lineage and language.
Okay, let me see. Do me a favor, look at the screen right now. Second Exodus bringing out some interesting things.
It says, second Exodus, I see Ashkenazi do not speak the original Bantu Hebrew. They speak Yiddish with Hebrew words.
You do agree that Yiddish came way after the Second Temple period.
Of course. Although I would be careful to distinguish between Yiddish and modern Israeli Hebrew. Those are two very different languages, and I think, unfortunately, in a lot of Israelite circles, they get conflated.
What do you mean?
Excuse me? I'm sorry?
How do you mean it gets conflated?
In the sense that people will wave off modern Israeli Hebrew as simply Yiddish. And I think that's a mistake. You can say there is some Yiddish influence on modern Israeli Hebrew in terms of syntax and even some small parts of vocabulary, but they're still completely different languages. Yiddish is a Germanic language. Modern Israeli Hebrew is a Semitic language, despite whatever syntactical influence has come in from non-Semitic languages. So they're very different languages.
That Yiddish is modern Hebrew with some Germanic words in there? How would you describe?
I would reverse it. Yiddish is pretty much German with a little bit of Hebrew and some Slavic terminology in it.
Okay, all right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What I would say is about Yiddish is here's the best example of the difference between Yiddish and modern Israeli Hebrew. If you only knew Yiddish, you wouldn't be able to read more than 99% of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible, right? Yiddish would not enable you to read the Hebrew Bible. If you knew modern Israeli Hebrew, while there's still going to be huge chunks of the Tanakh of the Hebrew Bible that you might misunderstand, you're going to be able to understand huge swaths of it. So modern Israeli Hebrew, despite its differences from biblical Hebrew, is still far closer to biblical Hebrew than it is to Yiddish.
You said closer. Listen to Gideon right here. My mother said that Yiddish is German.
Yes, correct. Yiddish is German. It's a dialect of German. Now, Yiddish, there's different dialects. So the Western forms of Yiddish are much more German, and then the Eastern forms of Yiddish are more Slavic, but both of them have Hebrew vocabulary and some Hebrew vocabulary, and it's written in the Hebrew script.
Okay,
but it's not a Semitic language at all.
Okay, I'm trying. All right, I got you virtual. I'm trying to read what she's saying. You see, after read this comment on here, please.
From Alton Johnson says, if it's not Hebrew on the pews, then you have to be honest to admit that. I agree. Well, this is what I would say. And this actually allows us to go back to the question of the church changing its position on what is on those pews. So the church used to state that there was Hebrew, or at least certain members of the church would say there was Hebrew. Then later on, they said that it was Arabic. And Pastor Kelly Richardson has raised an interesting methodological point that I agree with, that if you're going to say that it's Arabic on the pews, you should, he says, read it, translate it for me. But I would change that slightly to say you should make a case for Arabic if you're going to claim it's Arabic. However, if we're going to be consistent, the same goes for Hebrew. So I agree with Pastor Kelly Richardson that the church claiming it's Arabic doesn't mean it's Arabic. If someone's going to claim it's Arabic, they should make a case for Arabic. But then on the flip side of that, if we're going to be fair, the church claiming it's Hebrew doesn't mean it's Hebrew either. They also likewise, people who claim it's Hebrew should make a case for it. In either case, if you claim any languages on the pews, you should look at the markings and try to show strings of characters leading to words and phrases. Those are the building blocks of language. Anything else is, in my opinion, off topic.
But now, part of the problem is, were you involved? I remember when Pastor made the video. No matter how we slice the cake, the church in Georgia changed their position on their website.
Yes.
That was directly after the Pastor Kelly thing, and then you all got involved in different people arguing for the language, correct? It wasn't too far later that their position on the website was actually changed.
I believe they changed their position before I got involved. I got involved in late 2019. So I'm pretty sure they changed their position before I got involved. And then people speculate as to why. Some people say that, they were convinced by some bit of evidence. I believe Pastor Kelly Richardson says that it was political and they were pressured by somebody. But for me, I think all of the speculation about why they did so is irrelevant. The best thing to do is to look at the markings on the pews
and find some Hebrew in there. And if it's not
or Arabic,
like
or whatever.
The other brother just said, just admit it and we can just move on. But we can't just leave it up in the air. Like, I don't have to prove it to y'all if it's not that. If nobody can prove it, if nobody understands it, if nobody claim it, Hebrew's there, we have to put that down.
Or the way I would put it is, if nobody can read it, then I think the best conclusion is the one that Vocab and Faithful and myself have put forward, that's because there is no discernible language in those pews. I think that's the most probable conclusion. Now, again, I'm fallible, so someone could prove something else.
All right. Read that right there, please.
Abba Yah's daughter wrote, Pastor Kelly was onto something. That's why those devils hurried up and went and took over. And
this is something, because some people say, well, it's a conspiracy theory. Other people say, no, it's not a conspiracy theory. You can't mention vocab to Israelite. A lot of people with Israelite and this and that. Because vocab is a devil. People don't want to deal with vocab because they feel vocab is attempting, if it's the Lakadesh language, if it's One West, vocab is attempting to discredit. So anytime they even hear that name vocab, he's attempting to discredit the whole entire movement, when other people are saying, no, as sensible people, we can separate this from that statement, from this statement right here. But this right here alone is a very touchy subject. Just dealing with the whole Israelite thing and blacks in America being Israelites and the claims that's being set forth. So there's a lot of people that's scared to come out and even challenge or say anything to the contrary, because, like you said earlier, emotions run high when we're dealing with this.
Yes, which is why I would prefer that we separate out the lineage claims from the language claims, because I honestly believe that even if, hypothetically speaking, we accepted the lineage claims, they're not going to change our positions on the language, and I've, as I mentioned earlier, I've delved into a number of different and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but fringe or non-mainstream positions on Hebrew within the Israelite spectrum. So the Eve claim or Lashon Kodash, or now the Hebrew on the Pews. And what I would say is that a person can believe whatever they want to believe about the lineages of people and still hold that, for example, that Hebrew doesn't appear on those pews. I think they're two very different questions, and that's why I feel they should be put aside. And also, I want to reiterate that I don't think we should be impugning anyone's motivations. It's unhelpful to accuse people of having dark motives. It would be better just to look at the markings on the pews and examine that.
I have to agree with that 100%. Grace and peace. Do me a favor for this, for my brother here, for the pastor. He's saying for his edification, who's that boo?
I'm the honest answer is I'm no one significant. I am a amateur Christian apologist with, and I'm also an amateur student of Semitic languages. And I've been interested in Israelite topics for quite some time.
Specifically dealing with the language.
Yes, specifically, mostly I'm interested. My main interests were One West history and then language, mainly Lashon Kodash. But in the last year, people have encouraged me to branch out and look at some of the other language claims that exist beyond One West. And so,
look at Dr. I'm sorry, look at Dr. Do me a favor, read Dr. Turner.
Dr. K.T. Turner says, as a person who has been studying Hebrew for 3 years now, one letter can represent an entire word or phrase. Unlike modern languages, you do not necessarily need a string of letters to convey a word. I mean, I think that's popular in certain circles when they get into the Proto-Sinaitic script, where they'll treat the Hebrew characters as something akin to hieroglyphs, where rather than representing phonemes, they represent concepts. So, for example, Aleph could represent an ox, and Beit could represent a house, and so on. I must confess, I'm somewhat skeptical about that kind of approach. But nonetheless, if someone wants to make the case, I suppose that's interesting. I would still invite a person to then show the markings in the pews that they think are making discernible statements.
Do you think it's just the urban apologists attempting, because there's a lot of light right now, and I dropped videos on that discussing that there's a lot of light, or there's a lot of what I would call attention on Messianic Israelites.
If I could, I would love to comment on that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, and I know you mentioned vocab is somewhat.
No, they hate. Everybody in here, they know I have vocab on people. I got hate mail. Why you got vocab on vocab?
What I'll say about vocab, because I do know vocab's history in this subject. So vocab, to put it in context, vocab is a Christian apologist. Before he ever thought about Israelites, he was dealing with Mormons, he was dealing with Muslims, he was dealing with Roman Catholics. He's a critic of of all these faiths from a Calvinist perspective. He's a Christian apologist. Now, vocab got interested in the Israelite spectrum because in the city he's from, GMS, the chapter of GMS in the city he's from, was going to churches and picking arguments with the pastors there. And that's what put the Israelites on his radar. And just as he reserves the right to criticize Islam or Catholicism or Mormonism or atheism, so too he reserves the right to criticize the Israelites. And from his perspective, they struck first. Admittedly, it was One West that struck first, but that's what got him interested in the Israelite spectrum. And he's had an experience that I've also had somewhat. I mean, obviously our experiences are very different, but one similarity in our experiences is that when you try to deal with one group of Israelites, a new crop will pop up and say, well, forget about that. Why are you focusing on them? Take a look at this other subject. So, one day I'll be looking at One West, I'll look at GMS or the ICGJC was my original interest. And then people say, no, forget about that. Look at Pastor Kelly, Basil Akwete Amma, Rabbi Basil Amma, or no, forget about that. Look at this over here. Look at this over here. And so what happens is you wind up looking at lots of new subjects, and the Israelite spectrum is very, very diverse. And so a person winds up going all over the place, picking and choosing small fractions of this very large spectrum. That makes any sense.
I want you to look at this, because this is constantly going to come up.
Urban Samurai?
Do you have any criticism towards the Ashkenazi, Sephardic?
Sure, of course. I mean, it depends on what exactly we're referring to, but of course, I mean, I'm sorry, the question from Urban Samurai is, why are you interested in Black Hebrews and not the Ashkenaz? And I would say that, just to be clear, just because I'm not discussing a group now, that doesn't mean I'm not interested in them. My main focus in Christian apologetics is Islam. I have, great respect for Muslims, but I am, and hold on one second. Sorry, baby. And then, of course, I'm interested in other subjects, Hare Krishnas, and I am interested in the Ashkenaz. Even though we're not discussing it here, I was brought on to discuss the Pews. But yes, no, I have an interest in the Ashkenaz. I'm interested in like the Hasidic spectrum, and we can discuss that. There's similar phenomenon in Ashkenazi circles. Like, for example, Lashawan Kodash, that very phrase, right? They apply their system of pronunciation to a Hebrew phrase, Lashon Kodesh, right? So a parallel system has existed within Ashkenazi circles. The ultra-Orthodox, what happened was when the Ashkenaz developed in their liturgical uses of Hebrew, they developed a very Yiddishized pronunciation of Hebrew and Aramaic, right? And when Hebrew began to be resurrected as a spoken language rather than just a liturgical language, so the students of various Hebraists like Ben Yehuda, they started reaching for Arabic as an influence, for Sephardic pronunciation as an influence, and what had happened was they began to tell the Ashkenaz, your pronunciation system is wrong. Most Ashkenaz accepted that, and they've embraced the sort of pronunciation system you have in modern Israeli Hebrew now. But there was a small group of Ashkenaz who rejected that, and they doubled down, and they referred to what they think is the true Hebrew pronunciation as Loshin Kodesh, which is the Yiddish approach to the same Hebrew phrase that one gets Lashawan Kodash when they apply that system of pronunciation. So there's actually a parallel there.
If someone was to say shalom, is that showing an ignorance of the language? Is that not correcting what the whole world would consider? Is that ignorant or not?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I would say that in many cases, it's a sign. Most often than not, it's a sign that someone learned within a spectrum that's using Lashon Kodash, and maybe they don't know mainstream forms of Hebrew and they don't know the history of Hebrew. But I won't say it's necessarily ignorance, because I think, at least in theory, it's possible for a person to be familiar with Hebrew, and yet when they're within a certain paradigm, they'll use Lashon Kodash. I think that recently came up in the discussions on Garfield's channel between Mitzilel and Zion Lex, that Zion Lex has some study in standard Hebrew, and yet when he speaks with people who uses Lashon Kodash, he'll use some of their pronunciations, like, for example, to refer to the Tetragrammaton and so on.
Yeah.
I really appreciate BK Apologist. I'm a big fan of that.
Read what BK said.
So BK Apologist says, whataboutism is a red herring used as a diversionary tactic to shift the focus off of an issue and avoid having to directly address it. First off, I want to say I'm a big fan of BK Apologist, so I appreciate his comment in general, but I also really appreciate that comment, because I do think that even if it's not intentional, these sort of objections often do take our focus off of the subject that we're supposed to be focusing on. So in this case, we're discussing the Pews. I've had this experience with, for example, with the Eve crowd, when I tried to look into whether Eve is biblical Hebrew with the students of Beis Lakwete Amma. I got some of the same objections. Well, what about the Ashkenaz? What about Yiddish? It was always designed to sort of, let me take that back. I don't want to say designed, but the function it had was it prevented us from ever getting to the actual examination of the language. And I'm afraid that in the last year, that's been my experience with the Pews, that I've been saying, let's look at the markings on the Pews. I've made videos that have attempted to do so, and videos that attempt to discuss methodology, which we might show in the show. But unfortunately, no one has ever really discussed methodology with me over the last year. It's unfortunate. So yeah, I do agree.
And I know there's some people that have been attempting to do that, but why? So you think that what BK Apologist is saying right here, that this is a perfect example of it right here, where people don't want to discuss it, or, like I said, go off into ad hominems, or they just don't care about urban apologists, are just hating. They want to stop the movement instead of just dealing with the subject at hand.
Well, the only thing I would say that where I might differ, I just want to be careful not to impugn anyone's motivations, but I would say that functionally it serves as a diversionary tactic. Now, I'm not accusing people of deliberately trying to divert attention away from the subject, but that's the function it has. When we get into this, what about this, what about that, we wind up never getting to the actual subject. And I do believe that we should focus on the arguments, focus on methodology, in this case, look at the Pews, and not worry about what people's motivations may or might not be. And, that's my experience. Let me give an example. As I said, my main interest is Islamic theology, right? Apologetics dealing with Muslims, right? Which I've been interested in for quite a while. If a Muslim raises an argument against Christianity, it's improper for me to say, oh, well, you just hate Christians, therefore and then use that to ignore the argument. Rather than impugning his motivations, we should look at the argument itself. And I think that goes with everything else.
Grace and peace to the leader.
And by the way, BK Apologist said it's not about attacking Israel, it's about investigating claims. And I agree with him. I agree with him, because that's what I think the way we should see it. It's not I'm not going to be criticizing anyone's lineage. I'm not going to make any claims about anyone's lineage in this show. I just want to, look at the pews, and that's always been my focus. So Leader for Christ says, Abu, did you or Vocab ask Pastor Kelly for a discussion about the pews? Yes. So about a year ago, there was a discussion between Faithful and Sister E, a little over a year ago, in which it was my understanding that they were going to set up some sort of a discussion. We had a very polite conversation on the phone.
Didn't you speak with Sister E also?
I spoke with her once on the phone, only once. It was a very nice conversation. I have great respect for that woman. I know there's other Christian apologists that are less than cordial with her. I have great respect for her. We had one very polite conversation, and then there was a misunderstanding. And because she was under the impression we were going to set up a conversation soon, I was under the impression that we were going to use her forum, which was called Sister E Talks on Facebook, to discuss the correspondence. And so there's that. But then later on, after the misunderstanding was cleared up, I did begin to post to her forum, and I was very respectful there. I was respectful with Pastor Kelly Richardson, and I attempted to lay out my attempts to discuss the pews with him and anyone else interested in her forum, and also to discuss Lashwan Kodash. Unfortunately, and I do not know why, my posts were deleted from the forum, and I was blocked from the forum. I don't know why. I mean, maybe Sister E knows, but yeah, unfortunately that happened. But I never disrespected him, and I did try to at least initiate a correspondence with Pastor Kelly Richardson. And I want to say now that I remain interested in talking with Pastor Kelly Richardson. I promise I won't disrespect him. I won't take shots at his
I know you won't. And there's certain people that I attempt to bring on for discussion so people can see, so people can hear both sides, so people can work through it, because none of us know everything. We're all attempting to grow. We're all attempting to talk, but we can't be over here shouting and dropping videos, and they're over there shouting and dropping videos. Some people don't learn like that. They want to hear, let's sit down, let's gather the information. But sometimes when, I can't even say when people have agenda, it's a lot going on.
I think it's a natural process.
And like Alton just said, Alton feel like, listen, the Israelites were the moderates, Alton, attacking the Christian church, or were there camps attacking the Christian church, and then moderates came to jump on the scene like, let's gang, he already on the good ground, let's stomp them out right now. How did that whole thing go down? That's how I said timelines are important. And that's one of the reasons that I said, let's just get here. I want to make sure I separate my Messianic brothers and sisters. I just use the term moderates because urban apologists put that out there. But my Messianic brothers and sisters that I do believe are believers, this is where the problem comes in. So I said, let me dedicate a lot of my time in attempting to separate. And now, in the midst of all of this separation, they know who's who. I've brought some Messianic Israelites on out, and you dropped videos. You've heard things that Teo Ministry made. Shout out to them. And Minister Dante have made. You've heard me mention Pastor Kelly and Pastor Major. So people have gone back and looked at their videos and attempting to trace the doctrine. Other people are dealing with the language. And these are all separate things. Like you said, Abu, you're interested in the language.
That's my primary interest.
And if the language is wrong, the language is wrong. And we can separate that, and that still don't have anything to do. That alone, where's my other sister? She just said something like
that. By the way, if someone is wrong about a language claim, I want to say now that says nothing about your lineage claims. You know,
this is what Susan is
whether
saying.
It's Lashwan Kodash or Eve or Pews, any of that. I'm sorry. Do you want me to read this comment? Susan Gibone, forgive me if I mispronounced her surname. Why is this so important to him? This is not the foundation of Hebrew Israelites.
And you agree with that, don't you? I agree with that.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yes. So what I would say is it's an intellectual interest for me. I do have an intellectual interest in certain subjects. As I mentioned earlier, the One West history. I'm not saying anyone here is part of One West, but that's an interest of mine. And also languages are an interest of mine. So the Semitic languages. So there seem to be people that make certain linguistic claims. I'm a amateur student of Semitic languages, not any sort of expert. So I'm willing to discuss those claims with them because I have an interest. But no, I don't think they're foundational. I don't think they're salvific. Although some people make, for example, Lashwan Kodash a salvific issue. I don't claim that, for example, your pronunciation of Hebrew, has any weight on your salvation. But it's an intellectual interest, like anything else,
Okay, do me a favor. Just read. We're good to see you, Rodney. Read, Rodney. I'm trying to go up. Is that up next course? And that's
He
a
says,
whole other thing. That
he says, I
DNA.
wish we could have cordial conversations, but everything seems to be in a free fall. I agree. That's what I'm most interested in is cordial discussions. If I could say, I mentioned earlier, I remain interested in having cordial discussions, and I think correspondences, public correspondences, are a great way to do that because then we don't necessarily have to be on at the same time. That's why I really like the idea of having a correspondence on Sister E's forum. Let's talk with Sister E, because it used to be a public forum, and I thought that was a great place where different people could
Dialogue.
dialogue and respectfully and
so
at different times.
Come back and read and look also.
Exactly. So that way people could, yes, exactly, go back over it. It could create an archive. And so, maybe it still could be that if the forum could be made public, if I could return to that forum, and I would love to have a conversation, a dialogue with, for example, Pastor Kelly Richardson, and not just him, anyone else who's a proponent of the view that Hebrew appears on the pews. I'd love to discuss methodology with them and actually get into the markings and, the process of interpreting them.
I'm not sure, Rodney. I seen your post earlier on Facebook. I'm not even sure how we can even get back to that, because a lot of people, even in the comment section, when things get too heavy, people just automatically block somebody. That's a devil right there. You're a devil if you don't agree with me. And I think all of us as a people, if we're moving forward, if we say we love the Most High, if we say we're trying to live right, if we say love your neighbors, if we claiming certain things, we gotta slow down and stop trying to call everybody else a devil. You against the move, you're a devil. You're a devil. You're a devil. We use devil, heretic. We use a lot of things. We throw a lot of these terms around. And I have to admit, somebody else just said when it comes to Israel, every other group can just, basically, I'm freestyling what they said, can just run amok. But when it comes to Israel, everybody have a problem with that. I'm quite sure that there are people who say, well, no, that's not it. Now,
what I would say is that every group has people who are looking at it and criticizing it. If you're a Muslim and you go online, you're going to find lots of videos criticizing Islam. If you're a Roman Catholic, there's lots of videos criticizing Roman Catholicism. If you're a Calvinist, if you're a Mormon, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, there are websites dedicated to refuting your faith. If you're a Seventh-day Adventist, whatever it is. If you're a Christian in general, there are websites dedicated, lots of them, to attacking your faith. And there's no reason for the various types of Israelites to be exempt from that pattern. They should just accept that if you're going to publicly make religious claims or ideological claims, other people are going to reserve the right to disagree. And that's every faith.
And that's how we're supposed to be. That brings me to the other thing, because things are getting more technical now with people in their witnessing. People are bringing DNA. People are bringing the Hebrew, other languages. They're attempting textual criticism and so many things in their witnessing or in their preaching and their teaching and their promoting whatever they're promoting. If I'm a Hebrew pastor, I'm promoting that, and I believe that majority of the slaves or whatever amount of slaves that came over here were Israelites, and I'm attempting to call people back to the law, statutes, and commandments. I'm going to use whatever at my disposal. I recently seen something with somebody about the whole DNA thing and how different people, I'm even seeing different people saying, well, I saw those brothers over there say this and they're wrong about that. So it seems like it could be a free fall. I agree with Rodney. It seems like it could be a free fall, but how can we catch it and bring it back? Should we bring more professionals in the area, in the field? Should we have, that's how come I often ask, how should we deal with that? Because conversation, and one thing I often push is dialogue. That's very, very important. Abu, this is for you right here.
Well, because it's,
I think you kind of answered it, but
Susan Gibonnet, yeah. Why do you care? Because that's my interest. I have an interest in Semitic languages. I'm an amateur student of Semitic languages, and I've also been interested in the Israelite spectrum for quite some time. And I could get into my history with the Israelite spectrum. It was mainly with One West. And then because of that, people like some of the work I did with that online, and therefore I was encouraged to look at this. And I do have an interest in this subject, and I think the responses that I've received, they sort of increase my interest, because the fact that no one so far has been willing to actually get into discussing the markings themselves.
What does that tell you?
It's sort of encouraged me to respond, to keep saying, look, okay, that's great. Let's not, right, you want to talk about motivations and this and that. Let's get to the pews. And that's what sort of keeps drawing me in, these attempts to tell people, let's put that aside. I sincerely and respectfully think that some of these responses are fallacious. Let's discuss the pews. And as you might have some videos lined up, I think that's really what people should do. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll bring some of that up, but look at this. Read the
M.
script.
Kyles writes, it's been proven time after time after time again that we're Israel. So why won't they just accept it? If I
Why don't we just leave it alone? Why are you worried about the pews? It's Hebrew. It's Hebrew. If you don't want to believe it, it's Hebrew. Pastor Isaiah, that's what he got on here with his, with vocab in his discussion. And he said, if you believe it, you got to believe it by faith. Because it's just basically things like that. What I would say
is, look, even if I fully accepted a particular Israelite position, I would still be interested in the pews. And as I said earlier, it wouldn't change my position, So I think that sort of question, and I don't intend this disrespectfully to Mr. Kyles or Miss Kyles. I'm sorry, I don't know the person's gender, but I don't intend this disrespectfully to M. Kyles. But I think that again sort of conflates lineage with language when I think they actually should be separated. I mean, I could, hypothetically speaking, I could be a Hebrew Israelite, believe that everyone in the chat is a Hebrew Israelite, and my position on the pews would remain the same. And I would still be interested in discussing it.
Are you an agent? Are you trying to refute the people? Are you trying to refute a nation and you're trying to stop the awakening?
No. I mean, this is nobody's paying me to do this. And you notice I'm not taking any pop shots at anybody's national identifications or genealogical identifications. All I've been saying is, let's focus on the pews. Let's just focus on that. So no, I think it's a strange agent that they would send in that, who only wants to just wants to focus on linguistic issues. And again, if I was an Israelite, it would be the same thing.
I agree. Spanish Inquisition. You're talking to Mark. Somebody says, quote, go back up. I must have missed it. I'm trying. Spanish Inquisition. Put it back in there. Somebody said that you just had a good question or something to that effect. I don't want to skip over people thinking I'm skipping over certain things, especially if it's something important. Doesn't Berean invite Israelite? That's why people think it's an Israelite channel, because I have last year I've had nothing but almost holy Israelites on my channel. So people automatically think this is the Israelite platform because I'm on with so many Israelites so often.
And personally, I think we should be willing to dialogue with anyone. It shouldn't impugn us if we're willing to talk with, have cordial discussions and friendships. I mean, there's a strange thing on the internet where people try to pretend like you can't have cordial relationships with people who think differently from you. But once you get off the internet, in the real world, the people you work with, your family members, your friends, more often than not, they believe differently from you. I'm sure lots of people, whether Christian or Israelite, they have atheist friends and Muslim family members and so on. I do. My family is filled with people of different ideological.
All right, here's that DNA coming up. You know your agent. You know you're connected with vocab because you're against the movement. You're speaking against the movement, even though you're saying, listen, I just want to talk about the pews. I want to talk about the writing on the pews. Let's come to conversation. I do believe if you've been dealing with that for over a year, that
I've constantly seen that. Yeah, this accusation
could be a problem. If it's been all of this time, that it could be a problem.
Regarding Andre Bell's comment, I'm reminded of Mitzilel. One person I'm a fan of. Mitzilel, he's a non-Christian, but he's a gentleman who gets into Hebrew and fringe positions on Hebrew, and I saw when he was debating with the Eve crowd, with the students of Beis Lakwete Amma, he just wanted to focus on the Eve language and the Hebrew language and see their proximity, and they kept accusing him of of being an agent, of being an Edomite, of being this and that. And so what he would do is say, you got me. I'm an agent. Yes, I'm a white man. Yes, I'm an Edomite. Now let's get into the text. Right.
Now let's get into the text. Okay, Ella, I see you. All right. I'm sorry. I thought that was about me. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going.
That's it. So I'm just reminded of Mitzilel, who said that. I mean, if people want to make speculations about my lineage, that's fine. I don't think it advances the conversation about the pews, though.
Okay, and then somebody else would say now, and this is interesting. Somebody else say, forget the pews. Would you have a comment to this? The scripture.
Well, what I would say is I'm not going to tell people what they want to be interested in. Anyone who's uninterested in the subject is free to go to other subjects. That's like anything else, any other intellectual interest, or any So there, like, for example, if you're like, maybe I like to study philosophy. If you're interested in biology, you do that. But for those who are interested, I'm willing to discuss the subject with those who are interested. That's all.
I'm going to pull a video up. The Spanish Inquisition. That was something I was going to hold for later on. And because I had some questions, and somebody hit me with an interesting email talking about the Crusades and the Inquisition. Let me ask y'all a question before I pull this video up. Joe's daughter, good to see you. Who in this room right now, there's 200 people in here, who in this room right now think that the Spanish Inquisition, I'm just using that because it just came to mind, the Spanish Inquisition, Alton, or any of the Crusades have anything to do with the Catholic Church forcing Black Hebrew Israelites to become Catholic and hide their history? Who in here thinks that the Spanish Inquisition was about oppressing Black Israelites, or the Crusades, any one of them, was about oppressing Black Israelites and hiding their identity and forcing them to take on pagan Catholic practices? Robert says, I do. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Hold on. Let me see one thing. Or listen, all right, this is for you. Watch. I'm just looking for some. I'm looking for some yes or no's in there. Read that right there, boo. Before and I'll try.
Bantu languages in general, no. I haven't studied any West African languages, anything beyond the Semitic paradigm. But I did, and I'm begin to scratch the surface of specifically the Ewe language when I was attempting to explore the, and I'm talking more generally about, non-Semitic languages that are within the West African spectrum. So I did look a little bit at the Ewe language, a little bit, just scratching the surface when I was looking at some of the stuff on Basil Ekwete Ama and his students. But no, I haven't looked at in any, I don't have much familiarity with it. I'm willing to discuss it for, if people want to say that, for example, the Tanakh is written in a Bantu language, I'm willing to explore the evidence of that.
Okay. All right. Let me try to pull this on.
That would be a great thing to have a dialogue with, for example, on maybe Sister E's forum, a public correspondence, that way people can take the time to examine the evidence and stuff like that. I'm certainly
confirmed. Okay. I'm going. I'm sorry. I'm going to try. That's in the old history books. I'm going to try to pull the video up and tell me if I can. Tell me once y'all see it. Let me see. Okay, let me see. Let me just try to see it.
Greetings. I wanted to make a quick addendum video to my previous video on Pastor Kelly Richardson and the assertion that Hebrew cursive appears in the pews of the First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. So I wanted to open this by recalling the somewhat flippant and dismissive way that Pastor Richardson waved off the counter-assertion that the markings are actually Arabic. Here, listen to this again.
People are trying to erase it right now. They try not to call this ancient cursive Hebrew. They're not trying to call it as it is, an ancient cursive Hebrew, and some actually classified it as ancient Aramaic, right? But now the agenda is trying to classify this as Arabic. This is not Arabic.
Here's a quick rule of thumb, which I alluded to in my previous video. No matter what script or language one claims is present in those markings, one should attempt to demonstrate their position by pointing out and transcribing the distinguishing features. So to re-employ an analogy that I used in my previous video, suppose you as an English speaker are looking at a newspaper. You should be able to tell whether that newspaper is in English or not, right? Even if it's in a Latin script, you'll know which newspaper is English and which is Spanish, and you'll also recognize which newspapers are employing scripts other than Latin script. For example, even if you can't tell the difference between, say, modern Israeli Hebrew and Yiddish, you can nonetheless recognize that certain newspapers might be written in the Hebrew script rather than the Latin script. Or even if you can't tell the difference between Farsi and Arabic, you can recognize that certain newspapers are written in the Arabic script, and so on. There might be newspapers written in the Greek script or the Devanagari script, etc. Now, distinguishing a specific script and moreover a specific language employing that script is not an esoteric art. You can demonstrate it by pointing out the distinguishing features, pointing to the specific characters from the script. And then if you're going to posit that a specific language is there, you can point to the strings of characters which are forming words and phrases and sentences. So as a bit of a thought experiment, let's see what this approach might look like if one were attempting to demonstrate that Arabic was present in the markings on those pews. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not actually endorsing the claim that Arabic appears in these pews, but nonetheless, let's just go through an example, a thought experiment, as I said. So let's rotate this particular pew, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at the markings on that pew. So let's zoom in on this pew. And suppose one said they saw the Arabic word nas, which is spelled nun alif sin. That word, which means mankind, is actually part of the name of the last chapter of the Quran, according to its current ordering. So that's the 114th chapter of the Quran, is called Surat an-Nas. However, in that name, the word nas doesn't appear by itself in a vacuum. It has the alif lam prefix to it as the definite article. So perhaps one could argue that the two little lines to the right of the word nas, or what they think is the word nas, is actually the definite article. It's alif lam. So maybe it says an-nas, the mankind, or mankind. Now, in the last chapter of the Quran, Surat an-Nas, which as you see on the screen, the word an-Nas appears several times in the chapter. I'd like to focus on the third verse, which is what you see on your screen now, where it says Ilahin Nas, the God of mankind. So the word an-Nas is preceded by the word Ilah, which means deity, God. So perhaps this is relevant to the markings which precede what we see on that pew, right? I mean, it's at least possible. So let me just quickly erase all the other markings so you can just sort of see the word ilah and the word an-nas, ilahin nas. Here we go. So we just see the words ilahin nas, the word ilah, and the word an-nas, God of mankind. Here's the same surah, the same chapter in a more ornate form of calligraphy. And I want to focus on the way that the word ilah is written, because sometimes in some forms of calligraphy, some forms of handwriting, the alif lam get connected like sort of a loop. So what I'm going to do is here we're focusing on the word ilah, and I'll highlight it here in red. And you'll notice the alif lam sort of comes together with like a hook. With that in mind, we can take another look at the pew and take a look at that marking that comes before what's proposed to be an-nas. It too looks a bit like the way that ilah was written in that calligraphic form. So now, as we've taken a close look at the markings and attempted to transcribe out what it might say if it was something in Arabic, we start to see that it looks a bit like a calligraphic form of Ilahin Nas, God of mankind. Now, as a disclaimer, again, I'm not actually endorsing this position. It actually requires a little bit of creative imagination. In fact, one might notice that the alif lam in ilah is written differently from the alif lam that forms the definite article in an-nas. So, I'm not actually endorsing the position that Ilahin Nas, the God of mankind in Arabic, is appearing in the markings of this pew. But I just wanted to offer this thought experiment to show what an attempt to actually demonstrate a position might look like. If you're going to claim that a coherent sentence in any language, whether it be Hebrew or Aramaic or Arabic or Yiddish or Japanese, appears on these pews, you need to demonstrate that position if you expect anyone to take it seriously. So what you should do is point to the distinguishing features and try to transcribe out what it states, if you're claiming there's something coherent there. Otherwise, with all due respect to anyone who takes any particular position, you shouldn't expect others to just take your word for it or to take your claim on faith.
All right, let me stop right here. There's so much here. You want to say something else on what you have here? As I'm going back, there's so much. I was trying to look at the comments on my phone at the same time because I had the screen bigger. Go ahead, you got the microphone.
So I have several videos on the pews. That was my second video on the pews. And the whole point of that video was just to show what a person should do if they're going to claim that language appears in the pews. They shouldn't try to focus on people's motivations. They shouldn't focus on people's alleged lineages and so on. The best thing they should do is look at the markings themselves. If you think discernible languages in those pews, if you want to claim discernible languages in those pews, then show it. actually point to the distinguishing features in the markings themselves. And it's interesting to me that Pastor Kelly Richardson recognizes that with regards to Arabic and Aramaic. He says, oh, if you're going to claim there's Arabic in there, then show it to me. Show me what the Arabic text says. And I agree with that, but I also think that proponents of the view that Hebrew appears there need to have that same rule applied to them as well. If you claim it's Hebrew, show it to us, you know? Otherwise, then the claim, we can't be expected to take the claim on faith. And the other thing I want to say real quick about that is that was a hypothetical case. I was merely engaging in a thought experiment. But honestly, with all due respect, I think my hypothetical case for Arabic in the pews is stronger than any case anyone has made for Hebrew in the pews. I actually attempted to show 2 full words, a phrase from the last chapter of the Quran. I've never seen anybody show a single coherent word, much less a phrase in Hebrew in the pews.
Read the screen for me, brother.
Yes, sir. It says, Lydia B., this will always feel like an attack to us because it feels like outsiders, as always, are trying to discredit or make us out to be liars.
Lydia B., you're talking about specifically like Abu here and a vocab? I'm not putting words in your mouth, Lydia B., but are you saying like that specifically? Go ahead, Abu. You got the microphone. I'm trying to.
What I would say is, as I've said earlier, you know, I'm sorry, but no matter what your ideological position is, once you state it publicly, especially if it gains some popularity, there are going to be critics of it. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, there are websites dedicated to your faith. If you're a Roman Catholic, there are websites dedicated to critiquing your faith. And I don't see, and I'm sorry, so the same is going to be the case with Israelites. There are going to be people who disagree. But what I would say is, I've said repeatedly that we should separate out the lineage claims from the language claims. I'm interested in the language claims. I'm not making any claims about your lineage or anyone else's lineage across millennia. I just want to focus on the language claims.
Barbara's offended. Barbara said it's not Hebrew because Master says it's not. You believe it's Hebrew on the pews, Barbara? Who in here believes it's Hebrew on the pews? Type of 1 if you believe it's Hebrew on the pews and the people that built that church or worked on those pews specifically from the earlier founders in the church were Israelites. I think
by the way, I think forgive me if I mispronounce his name, Dunamis Bacchus, he said that's scholarship. It has no friends or allies. All it cares about and should care about is the truth. It doesn't care about anyone or any position. I think that's a fair point that the gentleman brought up.
That's how it's supposed to be, yes.
That we shouldn't worry about motivations. Let's just focus on the arguments. You know, that goes
because y'all do believe there's absolute truth. Right is right and wrong is wrong. All right, when I said type of 1, I'm looking at the one who said who. All right, 2, if you don't believe it's Hebrew on the pews. If Copeland, you believe, look at these numbers. You believe it's Hebrew. Or 1 is Hebrew, 2 is you're not sure. Or you don't agree with it. Keep going. All right, somebody said, all right, so why would so many people believe it's Hebrew? More scholars have to come in the field?
What I would say is that people are free to believe as they please, but personally, if you're going to expect people to believe that it's any language, like I said, Hebrew, Arabic, you could say it's, you know, if you want to claim it's Yiddish or Greek, I think a case should be made for the claim. It can't just, you know, I'm reluctant to say
believe
that
it, but you want to believe it in your heart.
Yeah, I mean, people are free to believe as they please, you know, but I think that I would ask that people make a case for their claim, whether they want to claim it's Yiddish or Ge'ez or Amharic or Arabic or Hebrew, whatever the case is, let's make a case. And that's why that video that you showed on Arabic is important because, you know, I skipped over everything about lineage or motivations and I went straight to the pews. Let's look at the markings in the pews and see if we can make out coherent strings of characters, words, phrases, something meaningful. You know,
look what my man Sean say right here.
He says, has anyone in the urban apologist
community paid to have the Pews writings translated?
No, not to my knowledge. To my knowledge,
I think the urban apologetic community believe that there's enough people that study because you know they deal with a seminary. A few of these guys deal with a little bit of language. My brother Abu right here said he's not a scholar, but he got a good understanding about it, and he don't see it. No one else seems to see it, and it seems like the people from the very church even didn't want to pay, so they
well, the interesting thing is
their stance on it. Go ahead, because I see a lot of ones still. A lot of people still believe. Now, those
to be fair, it's not a democratic vote. I mean, to be honest, whether or not it appears on the pew is not determined by a democratic vote.
Now y'all see that. I know that sound like devil talk right there. Now, anybody that put a 1 up, anybody that put a 1, do y'all have a working knowledge of the Hebrew language to say, I believe that because A, B, C, D, E, F, and G? A few people are saying no now, but the majority of people, you're right, it's not a democratic vote, but to be honest, the majority of people believe. 2 is you don't believe it's Hebrew at all. You don't believe it's any form of Hebrew on the pews at all. 1 is you do, and there's a lot of people that actually do. Go ahead, Marcel. I'm trying to catch these comments.
Well, one thing I would say is I think everybody, what you said, you jokingly said it, some might take it as devil talk, but I think they do agree that it's not determined by democratic vote, because the way to show this is, imagine if the vote went the other way. Imagine if you took a vote in the chat and most of the people voted no, it's not Hebrew. I'm sure they would say, well, that doesn't mean it's not Hebrew just because the chat voted in favor of it not being Hebrew. And I agree. It's not determined by the vote in the chat. Whether there's a language in there has to be determined by actually looking at the markings on the pews. And this is something that I really want people to take away from this. If you know people who are making the claim that there's distinct language, discernible language in those pews, ask yourself, have they ever made an attempt to show the language in the markings? Have they ever done? There's people out there with videos that are over an hour long discussing the pews, and they never look at the markings. You just showed an 8-minute video. Almost the whole video was devoted to looking at the markings. That's what people should be doing.
Why do you think they're not doing that? Because they just want to believe? Because they just want to,
I think because they don't find anything in there that they can use in favor of the position, and that's why they don't engage in it. I don't think it's intended deceptively. I'm not accusing anybody of deception, but I think at least subconsciously they recognize that they don't have anything that they can show to people. If there was something that they could really show, people would run with it quick and throw it up online. Say, boom, look at this. But that's the question I want people to ask themselves. Anytime you see someone making an argument for the pews, ask yourself that, has this person actually shown markings on the pews? Have they looked at the pews? And I'm talking about in their video, just like the video we showed. We looked right to the markings.
Okay, I'm sorry. Cal, you want to answer this one? This is for...
Says, do you think we're Israel? If not, please explain. I do not make any claims about anyone's lineage across millennia. So I'm agnostic as to who anyone descends from in this forum, vis-a-vis figures in the Bible. I also, much like Vocab Malone, I'm not concerned with people's lineage either. But again, that's a subject separate from the pews.
You see what Jameson say here? Can you agree with this statement here?
It says Hebrew is a Latin mistranslation of the ancient tongue. Hebraicus is from Latin. Yes. Well, what I would say is Hebrew is the English word we use to refer to the language now typically called the Ibrit. But I think that's whatever you want to call the language, like if we were speaking in Spanish, want to call it Hebreo or something like that. The point is, whatever you want to call that language, does that language appear in the pews? So, for example, suppose someone said the language in the pews is German. Whether you want to call it German or Deutsch or something else, the question is, does that language appear, irrespective of what the name of the language is?
I agree with you. I agree with
Dreno,
this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've repeatedly said, so Dreno says we don't need the pews to prove our heritage. I agree 100%.
Yeah, we stated that from earlier.
Over and over again. Separate out lineage, and if it turns out that there is no discernible Hebrew in those pews, if we all agreed, that would tell us nothing about your lineage. So yes,
nothing whatsoever.
People should not, because it just makes it too emotional if people try to mix it with lineage. Let's just focus on the markings. That's all I've been saying.
And I think that some people, and I don't mean no disrespect, but I feel that some people feel if it's not, and I'll tell why where it's more important. I feel some people feel that if it's not Hebrew, that they kind of lost something. I told y'all, I've said that with urban apologists. Israelites can say the police out here killing black people, and that's true. But there's certain people that just because y'all are Israelites, they won't agree with y'all. Nah. The Christmas tree is not original to the Bible. No. They're going to go around about. And I think a lot of people tend to do that when they're moving like a gang with the gang mentality. Now, the problem is when I brought people on for the last year and a half, I've lost engagements. I've walked away to specifically bring great light to people that are Messianic Israelites. I had one. I said, she's a good look to have on the scene. Sister E, shout out to you. It's her birthday. It's
a very
good.
nice lady. Oh, happy birthday to her.
And yes, and I said it was a good look to have her on to help in dialogue that things started moving. And she actually said, after being on months doing video, I got multiple dozens of videos with Sister E and the whole team of people. Sometimes it's just her and I. And she said, I think after this thing with Jabari and Dr. Vince Bantu, I think that it's good that the Messianics or the moderates would have a debate with the urban apologists. So this is kind of her desire coming to pass. So now that so much light is on them, now that I brought everybody that I brought on, from a Minister Dante to Ateo Ministries, both of them, Sister E, or it's my sister right here, Shonda at Large, or who else I had, a Minister Dante, everybody I've had on are leaders in the movement. What we call Messianics. They're not camp people. They don't want to kill white folk, think white folk gonna rape white folk in the kingdom and all that. They are what we would call Messianics. I believe these people follow the law. I mean, follow the Lord, Lord, follow the Lord, and are believers in the Most High God. Now, their views on how the law applied to them as they're Israel, that's totally different. I can't beef with that. But now that I brought them on, and I say, y'all see who the leaders are, people have been, because I was a former apologist, apologists have been looking at their things and grabbing them and saying certain things. And I told them, I said, listen, y'all can say what you want. There's certain things that people have said on my platform that have some believers shocked. Automatically, Alton Johnson went to making videos dealing with my brother Teu Ministries with the Africa and where the real promised land is. And some people, they came on and automatically they heard the thing with Vocab and Minister Dante, and the 400 years have some Black Christians shocked. Some Christians in general have them shocked, like, what in the world is this 400-year prophecy from Genesis disconnected to people in America? And people are like, wow, they're really, really, really shocked. She said, please stop, brother. Please, please, please read the Spanish Inquisition question. Okay, I'll go back to it. Go ahead. Come on, Abu, if you want to say something here.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not even sure what to say. There certainly is a lot of emotion, a lot of acrimony, and a lot of these
lot of it.
Yeah, but I definitely think people should look beyond. Also, the Spanish Inquisition is connected to the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know. I mean, and also I feel this is diverting from the topic of the pews. You know.
Yeah, I did ask that question because
I know. Yeah,
I can say, being that I have a lot of Israelites on, I am hearing some strange things. I'm hearing some things that are outside of established history that people are saying now. It's because it's some hidden truths that people researched and believe, or like you said, are we moving off of emotions because we feel some type of way about European people, about the slave trade, about certain things? Are we attempting, Alton? Are we attempting to take on a certain thing without any historical facts? We're from another planet. We're the tribe of Shabbat. Black people have been everything. Read what's the lady from Princeton name? A New World are coming. A lot of people coming out of slavery didn't want to be Negroes. So we said we were Moors. We started taking on different things. So now that people are researching, all these statements true? Were some people Moors? Were some Christians? Were some people in West Africa? Were they practicing the Israelite faith? Were they all Israelites? Were the majority of them Israel? So now we're looking. And in the midst of looking and searching, a lot of stuff is coming out. And I would often tell people, sometimes people start looking for stuff and they're just looking, they're not really researching and saying, let the chips fall wherever they may, like with the Pews, with the language. I would feel this isn't even nothing to beef about. Go get some atheists that read, professors that read, teach, and specialize in the language and see if it's so. Somebody said, well, why didn't the urban apologists pay to have that done? Who first put this claim on the scene? If I come on the scene and say I'm related to the Rockefellers and I got bread, y'all can challenge me, produce that, show and prove that I'm related to the Rockefellers, that I'm a multimillionaire. Who is the claim on to? Is it on the urban apologists? No matter what, I know some urban apologists and people pressed them individuals in the church and made them change their position. And the church changed it for a reason. Come on, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What I would say is I don't have any money. I'm an impoverished gentleman, so I can't do and pay anyone to translate the text. But I would reiterate that Pastor Kelly Richardson claims that Hebrew scholars have looked at it and did not see anything discernible in there.
Did he give a name of them? Did he give a name of them?
No, he never named anyone. He never named anyone.
I got to go doing research.
Garfield Reed claims that there's a gentleman who made a documentary on the subject and sold it to a university. He might be bringing out more information on that. That it was a gentleman who was studied in Hebrew and looked at it and concluded that. I forget what the conclusion was, but
Garfield asked specifically, why would I even let Pastor Kelly speak about him specifically? Why would I even give him the floor to discuss these things? But I believe things do need to be discussed.
Yeah, everyone should be able to say their part.
Say it don't make a difference. It makes a difference. It makes a difference because we have Messianic, we have leaders, and the people are looking, the people that have come on this channel as leaders. So automatically, just like the camps did, hanging out, looking for Eric Mason because they wanted to take down the leaders. They wanted to challenge the leaders. They didn't want to go to the minions. They wanted to go where Eric Mason was speaking because he's a leader in the urban apologetic community, and they wanted to challenge him specifically. And then when they did have questions and he came across the street and spoke to them, the video circulated. People started chopping up the video, and people started doing what they do. They want the leaders, and this is what's going on now. So people that are considered leaders are people of this movement. They are people that come on this channel, not all of them, but some of them have been on this channel. So of course, people hear them make certain statements. They're going to go researching a thing. They're going to go looking at some things. And this in that sense is wrong. This in that sense is bad. If he made an original video trying to claim that these are our people building these churches were Hebrews and building these pews, they were Hebrews, and this was the faith that they were practicing, and they knew it, and the powers that be are hiding it. If it was used as an evangelistic tool and it come to find out it's not right and exact, the pastor has to say, all right, I made a little error here. The church people have to change certain things, and there's nothing wrong with that because that still don't have anything to do with blacks in America being Hebrew, but that was just faulty. I can't stand on that and ride on it on the strength that somebody's a pastor, and just because pastors say, because y'all are just as bad as the black church now. Just believe in pastor without doing any research. Come on.
No, I would certainly say that rather than accept a claim on faith, especially, these sort of claims that are not central to anyone's faith, they should be up for discussion, and people should be within their rights to ask for the evidence for a particular claim, especially a claim that isn't a salvific claim. I mean, I don't see why this has to be controversial, but unfortunately,
if it's proven that the writings on the pews are Hebrew, I think it should have been proven by now. If anybody could have proved it, it would have been proven by now, or if it was so easy to prove. Somebody would have came a long time ago and said, oh, yes, A, B, this is what it said, A, B, C, and D. And that's it. But apparently it's not so cut and dry, and we're seeing that right now. But he's saying if the writings on the pew are Hebrew, then what? That's another tool. That's another proven fact that we can throw in there and add something else to prove that many people that came over here on the slave trade were Israelites. That's another nail in the coffin of the urban apologists. I'm just keeping it 100.
I would say it'd be very interesting.
Somebody's lying.
It would be very interesting if it turned out there were Hebrews on the Hebrew markings on those pews, but I don't think language tells us anything about lineage. Something that I've brought up in a couple of my videos. We have real world examples of slaves who could write portions of the Quran from memory, Surat al-Ikhlas and other parts of the Quran from memory. They would write, somebody would give them a piece of paper and they could write out a chapter of the Quran from memory. And just as knowledge of Arabic would not mean that someone descended from, quote unquote, the original Arabs, so too knowledge of Hebrew doesn't mean someone descends from whoever the original Hebrew speakers were. And by the same token, for example, everyone in this chat is typing in English. They're showing knowledge of English. Your ability to write in English doesn't mean that you descend from whoever the original English speakers were, and so on.
People 100 years from now think that Minister Farrakhan, Dr. Ben, Sheikh Anta Diop, that they were Europeans. Well, Diop didn't speak English because they speak the English language, and Malcolm X was European because he speaks the English language. That don't mean he directly descended from an English people.
Yeah, most languages have a variety of people speaking those languages, and especially for languages that are connected to religions. I mean, the number of lineages of the people who speak English or Spanish or who knew Latin in the past and Hebrew. I mean, for example, we can walk into an Ashkenazi if our only standard is to see if we can find Hebrew characters or markings that look like Hebrew characters, go walk into an Ashkenazi synagogue. You're going to find markings that look like Hebrew characters. But I bet at that point, people are going to say, well, that doesn't tell us anything about their lineage. And I would agree. Language and lineage are two separate things. I'm just interested in the linguistic claims.
Okay, do me a favor. Read my man Rodney right here.
It says, Rodney Frederick writes, we have to account that Arabic and Hebrew are Semitic sister languages. There will be commonalities, of course, but there's also differences. We can distinguish between Arabic and Hebrew. And but whatever the case that I made for Arabic was a hypothetical case. It was just to show what a person should do if they're going to claim that language appears in the pews. Actually get into the markings. And I hope that people who watch this take that one thing away with them, that think about any videos you see arguing about the pews, see if they actually get into the markings on the pews. Like I said, there's people
or just emotionalism.
Yeah.
People are hitting me and saying it's just emotionalism. We're not getting to the facts. People are offended and this and that. It's hard to deal with a topic when it's this. You can say what you want. The pews are a touchy issue. That's how I told y'all from a long time ago. We got to revisit that. We just can't go over things and just let it keep. We got to revisit that thing. We got to revisit that Judah thing. We got to revisit thing. Are we out here just making statements and believing off of emotions, or are we really looking for truth? We got to ask our individual selves that in here. Are we really searching for truths? Do you think? Read this statement right here. Then I'm gonna ask y'all a question in the room.
The one from Abaya's daughter. Unfortunately, we've had to rely on our lying, thieving enemies far too long. So, too, have to seek and find truth. We have to keep pulling back layers and layers of lies, but in time, the truth will surface. Okay, what I would say is people are free to take the time when they have the time to study any particular issue at their leisure, and this includes the pews. I mean, if anyone...
Good reason, y'all, that we should or that people that are involved in Israel, that Israelite pastors need to study the language more so they can depend, so they won't have to depend on translators. They won't have to depend on certain people. They need to get into it, especially if it has to do with them and their culture and this awakening.
If they're interested in the subject, if they're interested in the subject, feel free to study it for yourself, not to take anyone's claims on faith. That's what I would say. I'm not saying take anyone's claims on faith. Oh, it's wonderful to see Sister E in the chat.
Tell me if you want to jump on Sister E. I know.
I promise I'd be very respectful if she came on. I'm an
admirer. Let me try to send her the link right now. Go ahead. If you see any comments, you can see the comment section, can't you?
Yes, sir. I'm seeing some of the comments. I'll comment if I see anything relevant to the pews. I saw something, but I got distracted and lost it. I think it was from the gentleman called Yakoba, but I seem to have lost it.
Oh, he's in here. If you want to jump on, that's Peeps too. I've had him on. He's respectful. He can jump on if he likes. So he would have to send him the let me see if I see him in here.
Oh, okay, I see it. Yakoba Eveo wrote, we have historical newspapers that show a deaf black Jew came here from Africa speaking the ancient Hebrew. Yes, there's several articles from the 19th century that make that claim. It's the articles claim different things, different articles. Some claim that the gentleman could also write in Yiddish as well as Hebrew. It's a fascinating subject. I'm not sure what to make of it. And the gentleman claims that he came from a place in Africa which apparently had thousands of people familiar with Hebrew. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not sure where he came from, but the subject is certainly interesting. And I've seen the articles.
Do me a favor, Sister E. If Teo want to jump on, if Ashanda at large want to jump on, send them that link I sent you. I know you out for your birthday. She probably like, I'm on my birthday. I'm chilling. I ain't dealing with y'all right now. You came in here now. You came to the speak, but you here right now. Send it to Ashanda at large if she want to jump on. Did you say you seen Yakoba in here?
Yes, Yakoba Eveo is in there. Yes.
Let me go. Let me try to go back. Let me see. Where? How far? Kevin G, thank you. Look at Kevin thing on the super chat. We appreciate you. Read that right there, brother.
It says, Kevin G says, to the guest, do you find it interesting that the community uses Lashon Kodash and defends its phonetics, yet cannot translate writings on the pews? Well, I would say that while there are people for whom those overlap, like Kelly Richardson employs Lashon Kodash and is a proponent of the claim that Hebrews on the pews, but I think those are mainly two different subjects. A proponent of Lashon Kodash doesn't necessarily have to be a proponent of the view that Hebrew appears on the pews. And so And also, I mean, I guess it's interesting. I think that what I would say is that Lashon Kodash ultimately is a disagreement about pronunciation. And so
That's all it is to
it
you?
shouldn't
That's
preclude
all it
someone
is?
from being able to read Hebrew, in theory, at least.
Is
I'm
that
sorry.
all it is just a pronunciation thing? Do you think it's make believe?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to call it make believe. I think Lashon Kodash is an artificially developed language, and it hasn't reached the natural stage yet. But the way I would describe it is my examination of Lashon Kodash, and I've been looking at it for about 15 years now. It strikes me as a fraction of modern Israeli Hebrew with the pronunciations changed, with the vocalizations reduced to just basically one vocalization per character. And also, it seems that most proponents of Lashon Kodash limit themselves to a single binyan, a single verb stem, when Semitic languages actually have multiple verb stems. But that's the way I would say it. Lashon Kodash basically is modern Israeli Hebrew with a reduction in verb stems and most importantly, a reduction in pronunciations, vocalizations.
You agree with Alton on this right here?
Lashon is like Pig Latin. I mean, I guess, yeah. Lashon Kodash is, yeah, it's Pig Latin's an interesting. I have to be careful how I put this. I would
Are
just
you
say,
saying this here? That's talking about like Sister Pam and so you could be playing. Is it make believe? In your opinion, is it make believe?
well, I have to be careful with this because I think it's artificial. It's quote unquote make believe in the sense that it was created artificially in the 20th century. That's my position on it. But I'm reluctant to call that.
It definitely wasn't around 200 years ago.
Make believe is, I think I'm reluctant to call it that, like, because an analogy would be Esperanto, right? But Esperanto now has many thousands of speakers, but it's an artificially created language, and a language can be created artificially. But the language itself actually exists. The system of pronunciation actually exists. I would say not make-believe because it does exist. It's ahistorical. That's what I'm saying. It's modern. And Lashon Kodash is something that was created in the modern age.
Read the screen, Howell.
Most don't use Lashon Kodash. I would agree. Lashon Kodash was initially restricted. It started with One West, and when GMS started to pioneer the One West presence on the internet, that's when Lashon Kodash spread beyond the One West camps, and now you see all kinds of people who are not One West. So Sister E has a comment. You want me to read Sister E's comment?
Yeah, please keep going. I'm trying to catch.
Sister E writes, so when the Hebrew black in the 1800s was speaking, he was no, definitely not. I do not claim that. I'm not accusing that gentleman of speaking Pig Latin. I don't know anything about that gentleman beyond the 3 articles that I've seen. No, it seems they said he was
Arabic. Sean brought out a good point. Now, because people could be confused with what you said with the Arabic. Is it definitely Arabic, or you were trying to put a hypothetical out there?
Yes, precisely the latter. It was a hypothetical case for Arabic. I do not believe there are any. I do not believe there's any discernible language in the Pews. Of course, I'm willing to be corrected, but what I was showing is that if people want to say there's a language in the Pews, I was showing how a person should go about attempting to prove that. They should get into the markings on the Pews, and that's what I did. And what I'll say is, while my case for Arabic was purely hypothetical, honestly, and with all due respect, I think my hypothetical case for Arabic is stronger than any case anyone has made for Hebrew in those Pews. I haven't seen anyone attempt to show strings of characters in Hebrew on those Pews. I showed at least 2 words hypothetically in a thought experiment, but nonetheless, my hypothetical case for Arabic was stronger than any case that's been made for Hebrew. Rodney Frederick says, what evidence leads him to believe this is Arabic on the benches? I don't believe it's actually Arabic, but what I was showing is that there's a better case for Arabic than there is for Hebrew if there is a case, if there's a language on there. It was, again, a thought experiment. It was to show what proper methodology should be.
You see the screen?
Yeah, Delali Mensa Jamison says not Yiddish Hebrew. I'm not sure what she's referring to. I mean, I understand that's a jab at modern Hebrew, but I don't know what the context is. Do you want me to read Oshaya's comment?
Yeah, keep going. Yes, I put them up.
So what language does the guest, Abu, in his naive experience, think the writing on the Pews? I don't think I hear the answer. Correct me if I'm wrong. My answer is I do not believe there is any discernible language on those Pews. But my case for Arabic, which was a hypothetical case, it was to show how people should argue for language on the Pews. If you're going to claim there's language on the Pews, get into the actual markings and start showing discernible language, the distinguishing features of discernible language. That's what I did, and I did it in just a few minutes. And, I feel that no one has done that for Hebrew. No one has actually made a case for Hebrew, which involves actually looking at the markings on the pews.
Did you in your studies, do you think any slaves spoke Hebrew from anything you know?
It's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. There's certainly, I would say this, there have certainly been Hebrew speakers in Africa, and there's certainly been Hebrew speakers in the African diaspora in the Americas. So it's at least possible. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if any Hebrews did speak.
Okay. You keep reading. Go ahead.
Judas Maccabeus says Pastor Kelly needs to translate the Pews before claiming it was ancient Hebrew. It could have been Bantu. What I'll say about this is Pastor Kelly Richardson himself has repeatedly said that if someone's going to claim it's Arabic, they should make a case for it. They should show what it says. And I agree with him there. But then I would also say that that should also apply to his claim for Hebrew. If you're going to claim it's Hebrew, likewise, any language you want to claim is there, make a case for it. Show it in the pews. As Pastor Kelly Richardson has said multiple times, read it to me.
Read the screen.
Asaf Ben Judah says, Lashon Kodash is taught by a professor of theology in London with a Doctor of Philosophy degree from South Bank University. What are your qualifications, sir? I have no qualifications. I would love to see who this person is. We would need to be careful, but feel free to share the name of the professor that you have in mind, because Lashon Kodash is refers to the system of pronunciation that came out of One West, and we shouldn't confuse that with the related terms Lashon Kodesh, which is the standard Hebrew a standard Hebrew and rabbinic term for the Hebrew language, and or the phrase Lashon Kodesh, which was the Yiddish phrase for the Hebrew and Aramaic language, which has been employed by the very insular Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox. So I distinguish.
Did we skip over you, sis? Amanda Lodge, we skipped over you?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Shonda asked about my faith, I believe.
Okay, yeah. Somebody Roman Catholic. Yes, I'm sorry, sis. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, so yes, I am a Roman Catholic. Yes, correct.
All right, let me see. Do you see anything else that I might have missed? Spanish Inquisition said. All right, no, I'm trying to see. All right. Anything else you want to show? Anybody else have any questions for him concerning that? And remember, like we've said multiple times, that the pews have nothing to do with Israel as a people in this country.
I would simply ask that we separate the two subjects. You can continue to
separate. Like I wanted to separate them, the Messianics from GMS and everybody else. Let's just separate everything, and because that's one stage in getting clarity, separating things.
Yes, distinguishing them. Yes, the spectrum is very diverse. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
All right, Alan. Good. Grace and peace. Let's read a couple more here. Let me.
Sure.
See.
Alan Dennison says. Ishmael and Jacob was raised in the same house prior to the Most High disbanding him at Sarah's command. Shouldn't that the languages of Aramaic, Hebrew, or Arabic languages are similar? Yes, they're very similar. They're very similar. I have a number of posts on my Facebook page and also at least a couple of videos discussing some of those similarities. But there's also distinguishing features that allow us to distinguish between them, from their terminology and to a lesser extent from their grammar. The grammar is very similar, but you can usually distinguish between them even when you get past the scripts based on their definite articles, their possessive suffixes, and then of course Arabic has a much richer system of phonemes and verb stems. I'm sorry, Shonda writes, see, this is why my issue is about motivation. You are Roman Catholic working with the urban apologists. I consider Roman Catholic to be a false religion. And thank you,
you
Shonda.
think you could be biased about the pews because you follow Roman Catholic faith?
I don't see how, but this is what I would say. Ashanda is free to have that opinion of the Roman Catholic Church. And what I would say is, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that she's correct about the Roman Catholic Church. If Roman Catholicism is false, that doesn't have a negative impact on what I've said here today, which is that if you're going to make a claim about language in the pews, you should be looking at the markings themselves. And not only that, irrespective of the truth of Roman Catholicism, that has no impact on my point that my hypothetical case for Arabic presents a stronger case for Arabic than anyone has presented for Hebrew. Let's see what he says. Biblical Rumble Room.
Well, that's something different there. I just clicked on it. That's something different.
Okay.
What he says?
I'm sorry. Sean says, would he be willing to have the pews translated? Well, I mean, I would love it if the pews were translated. I don't have any money to pay anyone. But yes, if someone would like to, if someone claims there's discernible language on the pews, I would like for them to make a case for it. Show photographs, show videos, show the strings of characters, and then, giving rise to the words and phrases that they believe are there. Show the distinction.
And who do y'all think would be the best person to bring in that's fluent That's
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people that in theory could do it if there's language there. But what I would say is I'm not going to put any restriction on anyone, irrespective of their training. If they feel they can see discernible language, I would invite them to make their case. That's all.
Now, I want to say something. If it is not Hebrew whatsoever, if it's not Hebrew whatsoever, I'm asking everybody in here, what damage has that done if it's not Hebrew whatsoever? I'm asking every single person that, including Abu, if it's not Hebrew, it's found out not to be Hebrew, or if it's just one or two characters that are Hebrew, maybe one character that is Hebrew, does that make a difference if it's not all Hebrew, if it's nothing that can be read? Some people said, somebody said, why would they put scribble down there? What would that do if it's not Hebrew whatsoever? What damage would that be?
I don't think it would. I agree with Pastor Kelly Richardson that I think he's alluded to this, that if it turned out, not that he said this explicitly, but if it turned out there was no Hebrew on the pews, that would not tell us anything about anyone's lineage. So if someone wants to claim they're an Israelite, we do not refute that by saying there's no Hebrew on the pews. Again, I see the lineage and language claims as totally separate.
Okay, all right. Let me see. I'm looking at everybody. Okay, no, and so y'all do agree. It could be. Listen. Sean said it could be. You agree with? Read the screen. Tell me if you agree with Sean here.
He says it could be decorations. My honest opinion of the markings is they seem very random to me. I don't know if they. I don't know what their cause is, but because they're so starkly different on each pew that I've looked at, my gut feeling is that these markings may have been accumulated randomly over time, whether scratchings, whether people scratching them, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, children scratching them, I don't know, but it does seem to me random. I don't think, it's a deliberate attempt to convey language. That's my opinion, but if someone wants to say there's language there, they're invited to make the case. Gideon says, Shalom Berean, keep up the good objective work. In its totality, the Black Man is Israel. Cushite Israelite TV channel debunks all apions. Are we Israel? I'm sorry, is he asking me? I don't understand.
I think he could be asking you, yes.
Well, again, if he means that as a lineage question, I am agnostic on anyone's lineage across millennia. I don't make any claims about anyone's lineage across millennia, not even my own. I think lineages are essentially a black box. We do not know anyone's lineage across millennia. So I've never tell Israelites you're not an Israelite. I'm not that kind of Christian apologist. I know you don't descend from Jacob. I don't know who anyone descends from, and I also do not
positively say that. Just put it out there.
Yeah. Also, I don't think you can determine a person's lineage from their morphology. I think a lot of people make that mistake. Both Israelites and the Christian apologists who deal with Israelites. There's certain people on both sides who make that mistake. Think that they know someone's lineage just by looking at them. I mean, most of us, if you really think about your families. You start, you go 3-4 generations and think about all your first and second and third cousins. You start seeing, man, there's a lot of different looks in your families.
Keep talking. I have to plug this thing and let me get.
So Obadiah Yashar Allah says, you said you saw language there. No, I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I have consistently said I do not believe there is discernible language in the pews, but I was willing to make a hypothetical case for Arabic just as a thought experiment because I felt that no one who was arguing for Hebrew in the pews was actually getting into the markings. So I wanted to provide a model for how someone would argue for language in the pews. So I argued for Arabic just as a thought experiment. And I was hoping that people would attempt to do the same thing for Hebrew. If they claim there's Hebrew in the pews, do what I did. Get into the markings, show how they line up, show the words and phrases that you see. Pieces of me says, but then you're not an expert. Correct. I am not an expert. But I think that we should focus on arguments, not persons. And so, and that's why I said, if anyone wants to make a case, I invite them to make the case. I'm interested in seeing their methodology. I'm interested in seeing their argument, but I want them to look at the markings themselves. Let's focus on the markings and forget about all this talk about lineage or motivations or who you hang out with, etc.
Okay,
all of that is a distraction.
Hopefully, y'all just type of one if y'all can still hear me. I
can hear you.
I had to plug this. I had to plug this other fancy stuff out over here. I'm still trying to set this stuff up and get on that highway and get back home before this evening. We going in tonight. My Patreon people, we going in tonight. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share whilst I'm going through these comments? This thing is dying. Hopefully I can plug it up on the when I get on this amp track. Come on, brother. You got the microphone.
I'm sorry. What's this? I'm not sure where we should go from here.
No, I'm saying
if you're going to bring on anyone, I'd love to
say in closing. It was telling me the laptop was getting ready to die. I had to plug
Oh,
it
I'm
in.
so sorry. Okay, well, it's been a good conversation. People can find me on YouTube on Abu Hamad al-Masihi, and I'm on Twitter as Abu Hamad, and I'm on Facebook as Abdel Masih al-Manhatani. And I would love to continue to correspond with people. I saw Sister E was in the chat. I don't know if she caught what we said earlier. I used to be a member of Sister E's Let's Talk with Sister E forum on Facebook. I thought that would have been a great place for people to dialogue on the subject, to have cordial correspondences on that subject. If the forum could be made public and if I could be let on that forum, I think that's a great platform for discussing this. But we could discuss it anywhere. Any public forum, I think I would be willing to have a cordial discussion about the pews with anyone interested. That's all.
All right. Anybody else, if you had any questions, then go. And if not, I'm gonna get out of here, start packing up, or maybe have some dinner here before I get back to the city. But before I get out of the city, actually, once again, happy birthday to Sister E. We appreciate everybody in here, and I try to be fair. We try to just give information, bring people on to dialogue, if not together, separately, and it's not to hate, it's just to bring in some information and some clarity out. And that's all we really want to do. It's no hard feelings towards anybody. We just want to get to the bottom of it. Two people can't be right on certain things. The lady can't be pregnant and not pregnant at the same time. It's one or the other. And if we're wrong in any area, it's okay to say, well, all right, I messed up with that. And that's what scholarship is about: being able to correct, being able to change, being able to deal with new information. I thought it would be an easy thing. I thought it was definitely Hebrew. It was definitely no problem with a translation, but there's been a number of people that know the language and say that they don't really see it there, and then it came out later on that others are beginning to say they're not sure what it is. So if it's up in the air right now, the pews are up in the air. Leaders of Christ, it doesn't make a difference on who my people are, far as Israel in this country. It doesn't make a difference whatsoever. But if it's not any recognizable Hebrew to anybody in this country alone that reads Hebrew, it's okay that it's not. We just have to move on and just call it for what it is. But we can't promote a thing if it isn't. I can't promote the Christmas tree and all of this stuff as biblical truths if it's not. Period. Y'all know I had to throw the tree in there. All right, brother. So you want to give your email out in case anybody else got any questions?
They can find me, like I said, ABUKHAMR, Abu Hamad on Twitter. I'll put it in the chat, and then Abu Hamad al-Masihi on YouTube, and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. All right. Yeah, do that right now. We appreciate y'all too. We appreciate y'all support. Y'all know y'all can get in touch with me at BereanTeach@gmail.com, and I'm going to try to. Maybe I'll stay and do it here from up here, but we're going to try to get into some other things in a couple of hours. All right. God bless.